Berlin. Hello, it is 6 a.m. in Washington. It's midday in Berlin. I'm Monita Rajpal. You're watching CNN, the world's news leader. This is World One, live from London. It's a major embarrassment for Chancellor Angela Merkel. About an hour ago, Christian Wulff, the holder of Germany's largely ceremonial presidency, announced his resignation, caving in to pressure over a scandal involving political favors. Mr. Wulff said he was leaving office as prosecutors asked Parliament to strip him of immunity from prosecution. Now to Berlin, where CNN's Dinah Magnay is following the story. And Di, how bad is this for Mrs. Merkel?
Well, Monita, Mrs. Merkel's popularity ratings are extremely high, really because of the way that the German electorate believes that she's sort of protecting their interests.
In terms of how important it was for Mrs. Merkel to have this president as an ally to her, the fact that this is the second one now that has stepped down, what are the chances of getting another one that will be an ally for her back in office again? She's going to have to convince her political opponents again.
Well, let's just talk a bit about the role of the president. It is largely a ceremonial role. It is the person who represents...
Dinah, thank you for that. Dinah Magnay there in Berlin. The world is with you. That's the message the United Nations wants the people of Syria to hear. The UN General Assembly has passed a non-binding resolution calling for the Syrian president to step down and end the violent crackdown on his own people. 137 countries voted in favor of the Arab League plan. 12 voted against it, and 17 abstained. China and Russia were among the no voters. Earlier this month, they blocked a Security Council plan to approve enforceable measures against the Syrian regime. Self-shelling continues in the city of Homs. It's been under continuous bombardment by government forces for the past 2 weeks. As CNN's Arwa Damon reports from Homs, that has left the streets of the city deserted and much of the population too frightened to leave their homes.
It's very difficult to actually get around. There's only certain roads that we can take because of sniper positions.
And scarred for life, whether it is the deafening sound of shell fire or the loss of a family member, every day across Syria, children are waking up to a nightmare. Says Syrian government forces have killed more than 400 children since the uprising began. It says some as young as 10 have been arrested and detained. According to Human Rights Watch, once in detention, children say they've been beaten and even tortured. Well, around the world, children are caught up in conflicts that cause untold psychological suffering. Farane Varga-Kadam is with the Institute of Child Health at University College London. She also works with the Great Ormond Street Hospital for Children. Thank you so much for being with us. These are horrifying and traumatic images of children caught up in what is adult problems. What are the long-term impacts of those children, let's say, that are either being tended to because of the wounds that they've suffered, that they've incurred because of the conflict, but also just witnessing what's going on around them?
There's good evidence that there's long-term consequences to the trauma that has been suffered by children in particular.
I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
In other news this hour, media tycoon Rupert Murdoch has arrived in London to try to contain the damage from allegations of bribery at his top-selling newspaper. The News Corp chairman is holding a meeting with staff at The Sun, and the speculation is that he might even stem the tide of condemnation by shutting the paper down. Dan Rivers joins us now from Wapping in London, the south of London, the headquarters of News International, with more details on this town hall meeting that he's having there. Dan?
Yes, that's right. We don't know exactly when it's going to happen, but he is now in the building behind me.
We're watching World One. Here are some of the stories that we want to bring you up to date on what we're talking about. So, who is this man? You may think you know, but do you really? Newly released files show British spies were unable to find any record of Charlie Chaplin's birth. The mystery emerged back in the 1950s when the U.S. asked Britain to investigate him, looking for evidence of communist sympathies. A police memo to MI5 speculated that Chaplin might not be English at all and could have been born in France. Now, they say that crime doesn't pay, but being acquitted seems to. Amanda Knox is about to become a millionaire several times over after signing a book deal with publishing giant HarperCollins. The American student was jailed for 4 years in Italy for the murder of her roommate, but won her appeal last year. HarperCollins hasn't said exactly how much they're paying for her memoirs, but it is believed to be about $4 million. Now, you can't spell carnival without carnal. that in mind, the Brazilian government has added a new ingredient to the Rio dance mix. This year, it's giving out hundreds of thousands of paper fans decorated with advice about sexually transmitted diseases. They're also giving away condoms. And if you're wondering just how many condoms you'd need to give out for a big party in Rio, try 3 million. You're watching World One, live from London. So a year ago, a call on Facebook started an uprising in Libya that ultimately took power from a dictator and spread it to a wider group of citizens. Libyans are celebrating Muammar Gaddafi's fall from power. At the same time, though, the new government faces accusations of corruption and weakness. It's a complicated situation marked by old tribal tensions and a new political reality. Jumana Karacha is in Tripoli, and she joins us now with more on that. Jumana, let's talk a little bit about the year back and how, I guess, what Libya looks like today.
Well, it's a very different place, Monita, for sure. And people would tell you here that they now have newfound freedoms.
Thank you so much for that, Jumana Karacha there in Tripoli. We want to see what newspapers are saying about all of this. The headline in the Irish Times, songs and uncertainty 1 year on in Libya. It says some Libyans talk of growing disenchantment with the slow pace of change. Others cling to determined optimism, looking to elections planned for June and arguing anything would be better than chafing under Gaddafi. In the UAE, the National's headline is many challenges ahead on Libya's Revolution Day. It's a comment piece that says exactly a year after taking up arms against Gaddafi, getting the militias to lay down their weapons is proving as difficult as defeating the old regime. And finally, the headline in the Times of Malta, future still uncertain. It's an editorial that goes on to say Libya's new leaders face an enormous challenge to build a country based on the rule of law after 42 years of one family rule while preventing revenge attacks. In Syria, the city of Homs remains under attack, suffering its 14th straight day of shelling. One resident says it is the worst yet. Nick Payton-Walsh joins us now live with more from neighboring Lebanon and Beirut. Nick, tell us more about what's happening today in Homs.
Well, as usual, every morning for the last 17, there has been shelling on Homs, absolutely. Reports from activists, though, that this morning 9 bodies were in fact found around the city.
Okay. Nick, thank you. Nick Payton-Walsh there in Beirut. Well, the situation in Syria and how to respond to it were the focus of a congressional hearing in Washington. The top U.S. intelligence official told lawmakers even the departure of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad would have some unpalatable consequences. Chris Lawrence reports.
Dozens more Syrians were killed in another day of violence.
Saturday's funeral for Whitney Houston will be held in private, but fans wanting to mourn the star will be able to watch over the internet. The ceremony takes place this weekend at her childhood church in Newark in New Jersey. Among the friends and family expected to attend, Houston's ex-husband, Bobby Brown. Thank you. Susan Candiotti there in Newark. And welcome back. There was we were going to go to sports, but we're not going to go. We're going to take you to Paris now, where there is a news conference being held with the British Prime Minister David Cameron and the French President Nicolas Sarkozy. Let's take a listen.
That we wish to welcome most warmly our British friends, David Cameron and...
You've been watching there the news conference being held by the Prime Minister of Britain, David Cameron, and the President of France, Nicolas Sarkozy. They are in Paris on an annual bilateral meeting that they're having on on various issues that they're having joint discussions on, including Iran, Afghanistan, the Euro debt crisis, the Greek debt crisis as well as Syria. On Syria, I just want to bring up and mention that they had started talking about the establishment of humanitarian aid for rations for up to 20,000 people there, and they were saying that they want to continue to go through the UN to make sure that they go through all the proper channels to deal with that country. They also talked about the joint development of an unarmed, unmanned military plane or drone. Again, they continue to talk about the elections that are coming up there in France, and of course Britain has voiced its support for Nicolas Sarkozy. There'll be more coming out of this news conference and this joint meeting that they've been having. We'll bring that to you here on CNN when we get it. For now, I'm Monita Rajpal. You're watching CNN.